first lesson is on finding a midpoint. As you may know, midpoint is exactly halfway between two endpoints. Let's start with an example. Say you had a point at 2, 1. And say you had a point at 4, 5. 4, 5. And say there was a straight line through there. If you had a straight line through there, you could find the midpoint, and sometimes it's easy to just see it on the graph, but not always. So you may guess that the midpoint is somewhere exactly in the center there, but how do we find it precisely? Let's consider the horizontal portion and the vertical portion of the distance between these 2 points. In green, we're going to look at the x values. So the x values are 2 and 4. That gives us the horizontal distance between the x values. How can we find exactly in between those 2 points? Well, you can see on the picture exactly in between is at 3. But numerically, the average of the x values would be found by adding up the x values and dividing by 2, because there are 2 of them, which gives us 6 divided by 2, which gives us 3. So that would give us the first component of the midpoint. In blue, let's take a look at the vertical distance. That's formed by the y values, which are at 1 and at 5. So let's take the average of the y values and see if that gives us exactly between 1 and 5. 1 plus 5 over 2 is 6 over 2 is 3. Is 3 exactly in between 5 and 1? Why, yes it is. So exactly halfway in between the vertical is at 3. So that gives us the y component of the midpoint. Now you may agree that 3, 3 looks on this picture like exactly between 2, 1 and 4, 5. Therefore, we found the midpoint. So, in general, the midpoint can be seen as the average of the x values as its x value and the average of the y values as its y value. If you really, really want a formula for that, you can see it as dun, dun, dun. You're averaging out your x values and averaging out your y values. So this formula is for a midpoint between x1, y1 and x2, y2. The little numbers there are just to signify 0.1 and 0.2. So let's take a look at an example where we don't need to graph anymore. We're given 2 points and they want to find the midpoint between them. So numerically, we know we can take the average of the x values and the average of the y values. If you'd like to use the little numbers, you could signify x1, y1 and x2, y2. So the midpoint would be averaging the x values. So negative 2 plus 4 over 2, and averaging the y values, negative 1 plus 3 over 2. Calculate that, you get 4 minus 2 is 2 over 2, comma 3 minus 1 is over 2. So 2 over 2 as well, and in this case our midpoint is 1, comma 1. Please also note that your answer may not always be a nice whole number. So an example of that would be say you had 1 comma 5 and 2 comma negative 7. So if you found the midpoint, you'd have 1 plus 2 over 2 and 5 minus 7 over 2, giving you 3/2, which is 1.5, or you can leave it simplified as 3/2, that's fine. And 5 minus 7 is negative 2 over 2, which leaves you with 3/2 and negative 1. So please don't be worried if you are left with a fraction.